What's up, Fern Family? I hope you're doing well. In this video I would like to give you guys a tour of the animal room. When you walk into the room, the first thing you'll see is my turtle. But to keep this video nicely organized, we're gonna start over here next to the door. From here we're gonna slowly work our way to the right and around the room, going over each setup until we make it all the way to the other side, where we're going to end this video with the newest stand. Now, one more thing before we get started is that I've made videos about pretty much every setup you're about to see. So if you're interested about one of these projects, I highly encourage you to check out the description, as I'll be listing links to every video down there. Now, without any further ado, let's get started. So to kick things off, let's talk about my bucket of shame, aka the guppy bucket. This is a 20-liter bucket which holds all of my baby guppies, as well as a few assassin snails, mana shrimp and blue dream shrimp. This bucket was kind of an accident and born out of necessity when I was moving some stuff around roughly 6 months ago. Needless to say, I never got around setting up a proper aquarium for these guys, and funny enough, I started to like this bucket and seeing everyone from above. So my current plan for this bucket is to switch it out for a little indoor pond with emerged plant growth. Kind of like what Tanner from Serpent Design has made a few years ago. Anyway, if we move over to the right, we find the first proper aquarium. This is a 110-liter aquarium which is set up to hold and propagate aquarium plants. That said, it also holds my baby electric blue Acara. Her name is Zula. For those of you unfamiliar with her story, let me give you a brief recap. Back in May, my brother texted me saying his electric blue Acara had spawned in his community tank. Since there are a lot of other fish in there, they had no chance of survival. So I took in the babies. Having never raised a fish like this, I was slightly nervous, and only a couple of days later I thought I had already failed, as all 30 babies had suddenly disappeared. Now, I did put them in a planted tank, so I had good hopes that they were just hiding somewhere, and I continued to feed the tank. Eventually I noticed that there was one baby left in the tank, and that baby was Zula. She has grown a lot since then and still has some growing to do. But I do feel really proud that I managed to raise this fish. As for the tank itself, it's been set up for about 2 months now. As I mentioned before, it's set up to be a holding and propagation tank for my aquarium plants. And it's doing a pretty good job. This tank is lit by 2 small LED floodlights and filtered using an Aqua Clear 20 hang-on-back filter. The filter is probably too small for this tank, but since the bioload is so small, it's doing a pretty decent job for now. Moving up from this tank, we have the RopeFish Jungle. This tank is slightly bigger than the last one, holding roughly 125 liters. As the name suggests, this tank is home to my ropefish. These are relatively rare fish that I'm super happy to have in my animal room. This tank has now been set up for roughly 3 months, and up until a week ago it was growing in nicely. I do have some duckweed in this tank, which I usually think is a pretty nice plant to have. However, last week it started to overrun this tank and block all light from reaching the plants underneath, causing them to slowly die. I've since addressed the issue, but that's why it looks a bit empty right now. Not to worry though, as I'm pretty sure these plants will bounce right back. The tank is filtered using an internal jewel filter which originally came with the 110-liter aquarium that's below it. As for lighting, I'm using the same LED floodlights as the other tank. But this time I've raised them up a bit, as my long-term vision for this aquarium doesn't include ropefish. I plan on doing a completely different scape in here, with plants emerging from the top and having a completely different species of fish down in the water. I'll elaborate a bit more on my plans for the ropefish later in the video, but first let's move over to this corner of the animal room. Here I have my comfy chair and maintenance cart. In the chair lies one of my failed projects, the picture frame terrarium. Although I really like the concept, it just doesn't really want to work the way I want it to. All the moisture in the system wants to travel up, and thus the bottom keeps drying out. On top of that, the hardware allowing the picture frame to hang broke, so it can no longer hang on the wall. So I'll be dismantling it soon and reusing the materials for future projects. As for the maintenance cart, this thing is awesome. This cart holds all of my fish food, gecko food, scaper tools, water conditioners, medicine and much more. To be fair, there's no real reason this thing should have wheels, as I never move it around. Either way, I get much use out of it, as it really helps with keeping this room organized. Moving from one corner of the room to the other, I have a few buckets for a future project. but I'll talk more about that later. I also have 2 empty spots that I want to fill with some plywood aquariums. Without spoiling too much, on the left I'm planning a 200 liter RopeFish aquarium and on the right a 150 liter fire belly toad paludarium. But that's all I'm gonna say for now though, so let's quickly move on. Above the empty spots I have my 240 liter Crested Gecko terrarium. Her name is Tito and she's the first reptile I've ever owned. It's a bit hard to get her on camera as she sleeps during the day and is most active at night. And I often get asked how a nocturnal animal like this can even be any fun. But it's pretty simple in my opinion. If you have an animal that's awake during the day, you don't really get to spend that much time with it anyway, as you're probably gonna go to school all day or work all day. In the case of Tito, her lights turn off at around 7 o'clock and as soon as they do, she wakes up, comes right up to the glass, ready to be handled or fed, which is ideal in my opinion. The tank itself is also the very first plywood enclosure I've ever built, and I'm still very proud of the tank itself. The scape inside, I'm less proud of. Quite a few plants didn't make it and there's just too much wasted open space in my opinion. I'm not yet sure if I want to completely redo the scape or just add some elements to the existing scape. Either way, I'm sure you'll see some content about this tank in the coming year. Moving over a bit, we have one of my all-time favorite tanks, the Spotted Turtle tank. This is a custom built 200 liter plywood tank that holds Koa, my spotted turtle. Alongside her, this tank also holds roughly 10 koi guppies and a few amano shrimp. By the way, these guppies are the parents of the ones in the bucket of shame. I recently did a big update video on this tank, so I won't go into too much detail. The only thing that's changed since that video is that I've added a bunch of duckweed. This is the only tank in which duckweed keeps disappearing, and that's probably because Koa keeps eating it. I've never seen her eat duckweed, but spotted turtles are known to do so. Moving on, we have my desk area. This is kind of a mess and probably not that interesting, so we'll just quickly move on to the final stand. This stand is the most recent addition to the room, and down at the bottom it holds 2 45 liter tanks. The one on the right is a quarantine tank for some plants and 5 dwarf neon rainbow fish. I think these guys are beautiful and often overlooked. They tend to get overshadowed by their bigger cousins like the Bosemani rainbows. Moving to the left, we have another 45 liter aquarium. In this tank I had a breeding project going on. I had noticed that the rainbow fish had been laying eggs in this plant, so I moved the eggs to this tank. All was going well and within a week after moving the eggs, I had about 50 baby fish. I was ready to make a progress video, but right as I was about to record, I noticed I had an outbreak of planaria flatworms. Usually these guys are pretty harmless as a lot of fish tend to eat them. However, in the case of shrimp or vulnerable baby fish, it's a different story as these worms might actually eat them, which is exactly what happened here. All 50 of my baby rainbows have been attacked and died. It's really annoying, but you win some, you lose some. Needless to say, I'll be taking this tank down soon and repurpose it for something else. If we zoom out a little and turn on the light, we can see an empty tank up above. This tank has some fairly unique dimensions, measuring 140 centimeters long but only 35 centimeters deep and 30 centimeters tall. These dimensions make this tank perfect for a river style setup. Behind the scenes I've been collecting all kinds of materials for this tank and I really hope I can begin building this setup within a month. Anyway, I'm really excited to get started with this tank, and if you don't want to miss how this one turns out, I'd recommend you subscribe and turn on notifications. Moving up, we have the final shelf of this video, my Terrarium Shelf. This one holds all of my smaller projects such as the Isopod Jungle, the Nothing But Dirt experiment, a small Nepenthes plant, my smallest terrarium yet, and the Jewel Orchid terrarium. All of these are doing fine, and other than maintenance, these will remain untouched in the coming year. However, the same can be said about the Mini Jungle terrarium and the Legend of Zelda terrarium. They are both doing fine, but I'm not really enjoying them that much anymore. And thus I will most likely replace them with something new. And there you have it, Fern Family, a tour of the entire animal room. We've gone over every single tank in this room, and this is probably the most extensive tour of the animal room I've done so far. Now there's one tank we kind of brushed over, and that is the spotted turtle tank. And that's because, like I mentioned earlier in the video, I just did an extensive update on that tank alone. So if you want to get a full recap of how this tank was built and how it has evolved over the past year, I recommend you watch this video next. As always, thank you guys for watching. Let me know down in the comments which of these tanks was your favorite, and then I'll see you guys in this video. Thanks for watching, until next time.